All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to join us for our Earth Week webinar and Phone-A-Thon. My name is Sammy Doozy, and I will be co-presenting with my colleague Zitlali Rico. We are both food recovery fellows with the California Climate Action Corps, which is a climate-focused branch of AmeriCorps, and we're posted at FoodCycle LA. So today we'll be talking briefly about food waste in the US. Then we'll introduce FoodCycle LA and how it works to address this issue. We'll talk about Senate Bill 1383, which requires businesses to donate their excess edible food, and the volunteer opportunity we will be providing you with, which will be calling a list of food producing businesses around Los Angeles and educating them about SB 1383 and providing them with resources to get a food donation program set up with us. So here is a quick quote by Tristram Stewart, an English author and environmental campaigner. "Cutting food waste is a delicious way of saving money, helping to feed the world and protect the planet." So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of food waste on the environment. So according to the EPA, roughly a third of all food produced for consumption in the US ends up in the landfill. Food waste is also the single most common item landfilled at 24% of all waste in the landfill. And it's also important to remember that when food is wasted, all of the resources that go into producing the food, so that's labor, water, and transportation, are also wasted. And all of these efforts combined produce, oops, somebody just entered the waiting room. Hang on 1 second. All of the resources that go into producing that food, so labor, water, and transportation, are also wasted. And all of these efforts combined produce additional carbon dioxide emission, and that totals up to over 170 million metric tons annually. And when food decomposes in the landfill, it produces methane, which is an even more toxic greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So these 170 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions are equal to the annual CO2 emissions of 42 coal-fired power plants and enough fertilizer wasted to grow all plant-based foods for US human consumption, enough water and energy to supply 50 million homes, and an agricultural land area equal to the size of California and New York. Reducing and preventing food waste can increase food security, foster productivity and economic efficiency, promote resource and energy conservation, and address climate change all in one. And that's where our organization, FoodCycle LA, comes in. I'm going to talk a little bit about us, who we are as an organization, and the food recovery work we do to tackle the very pressing issue of food waste and insecurity in Los Angeles. So FoodCycle LA is a nonprofit organization that addresses food waste and insecurity through food recovery. It began as an informal group of volunteers led by Nancy Veda. She's the third woman from the left in the picture, and she's now the executive director. She started out with some of her yoga friends going to grocery stores and asking for donations and distributing that food to local churches until 2014 when it became an official nonprofit. And since then, they've partnered with LA Sanitation and started getting more consistent funding to redistribute food on a much larger scale. Currently, the organization is primarily powered by a network of over 450 volunteer drivers who use their personal vehicles to pick up food from businesses. And we also have 4 staff drivers who drive fully electric company vans, which you can see there we're standing in front of in the picture. And to document all of our food runs, we use an app called Carrot. This software helps streamline our process, easily track and record food weights, and basically monitor the impact we make to feed people in our community and keep food out of the landfill. So since March of last year, FoodCycle has worked with 254 donors. So that's any food producing business like grocery stores, restaurants, bakeries, caterers. 195 receiving agencies, which are nonprofits that distribute the food to their communities, to redirect over 6 million pounds of food to communities in need. And that's over 11,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide that would otherwise be emitted from decomposing in a landfill. And here are some photos of some of our food distributions. FoodCycle LA provides the food for these distributions, but they are primarily organized and run by the nonprofits that we work with. So now I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Lolly.
Hey everyone. My name is Lolly. I wanted to expand a little bit on the volunteer support opportunities at FoodCycle LA. So in order for FoodCycle to make the massive impact of reducing food waste and feeding people in our communities, we really do rely on the amazing work of our volunteers. And we have all kinds of opportunities available, such as becoming a food recovery driver, which is by far the most common way that people volunteer. And that work is very important because we have donations coming from all over LA County, and our staff drivers aren't always able to cover all those runs in a given day. So volunteers definitely help fill in that gap. Also taking photographs at some of our distributions or some of the distributions that we support. We're always looking to put a spotlight on the people that are helping the cause and holding the space for distributing all the excess food to the communities. Administrative tasks. Sometimes we need support organizing data or gathering information about donors or receiving agencies. And the last form of support that we get from volunteers is outreach, which we are so happy that you've joined us here today because we really need your support with this very important task of doing outreach. So there are still plenty of businesses out there that don't know that donating their excess food is mandated, or it will be mandated in between now and 2024. And they don't have a food donation program in place yet. So we need your support to reach out to them and educate them about SB 1383, which we'll go over in just a moment. To provide them with the resources they need to get a food donation program in place with FoodCycle. And then if by the end of the webinar you feel that you want to volunteer in other ways, or the other ways that I mentioned, we will be sending a follow-up email with links to get you started with all of that. And with that, now I'll just jump into giving you all some background information about SB 1383. And we'll transition into some of the logistical details about outreach after that. So what is SB or Senate Bill 1383? So in 2016, the state of California passed Senate Bill 1383. It is California's short-lived climate pollutant reduction strategy. And so this bill basically sets some hefty goals that aim to reduce the amount of methane and other greenhouse gas emissions statewide. It is the most significant waste reduction mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. And to meet this goal, the bill establishes two main targets that we want to achieve by 2025. And the first target is to reduce 75% of organic waste disposal by 2025, which means that the state needs to reduce organic waste by more than 20 million tons annually to reach that goal. And organic waste can be anything from food waste, green waste, wood waste, and paper products. And then the second target requires that 20% of edible food, which is being thrown in landfills, needs to be recovered for human consumption by 2025. And this is the part of the bill that we really focus on. So as Sammy mentioned earlier, a third or 30 to 40% of food that is produced in the US currently gets thrown into the landfill. So by increasing waste prevention, encouraging edible food rescue, and expanding composting services throughout the state will help reduce methane emissions from organic waste. And there are several ways that food can be saved from going into the landfill, right? So the image on the screen there shows the hierarchy of food recovery according to the EPA. And it basically just prioritizes the different options for addressing the issue of wasted food from the most to the least preferred. So as you can see, recovering food to feed hungry people is a top priority just after source reduction, which source reduction is just basically reducing the amount of surplus food which is currently being produced. So we want to make sure we're not producing more food than is needed. But after that, once the food is produced and it's out in stores, we want to make sure that we're recovering the most amount of it and putting it into the hands of people that need it, which is our focus at FoodCycle. And then everything that follows, just such as using food scraps to feed animals, using food waste for industrial purposes, such as fuel and energy, and composting are all options that we want to consider before letting the food go straight into the landfill. And SB 1383 goes into all of those things. But we are focusing on the food recovery aspect of it. So can you go to the next slide? Okay, so SB 1383 requires Tier 1 and Tier 2 businesses in California to participate in a food recovery program. What are Tier 1 and Tier 2 businesses? Glad you asked. The distinction between the two tiers basically has to do with the complexity and the timing requirements. So businesses in the Tier 1 category are required to have food recovery programs by January 1st of 2022, which already passed. It's been a year. So these businesses are already getting inspections at their stores to make sure they're complying with the law. And these businesses tend to be those that produce more shelf-stable foods and produce. And these are places like supermarkets, grocery stores, food service providers, and wholesale vendors. And then Tier 2 businesses are required to have a program in place by January 2024. So these are businesses that typically have more prepared foods to donate, which require more careful handling to meet food safety standards, such as time and temperature control. So it's going to take a little bit longer for them to be required to donate, but a lot of them have already started the process. It's helpful for them to start early. These are places like restaurants, hotels, health facilities like hospitals, rehab centers, businesses and venues that host large events, state agencies that have cafeterias, and schools as well that have cafeterias. So those are all businesses that fall under the Tier 2 category. Next slide. As I mentioned before, the businesses that fall into the Tier 1 category are already getting inspected. And so they basically have to prove that they're currently donating the maximum amount of recoverable edible food. They need to have a contract in place with a food recovery organization like FoodCycle. They need to maintain records of the edible food they're recovering, such as the contact information of the food recovery organization, as well as the types of food, the amount of food in pounds, and the frequency of food donations. So all this is just to ensure that they're complying with the new law. And so in order for to help businesses fill these requirements, FoodCycle has partnered up with Carrot, which is an online platform that allows businesses to track all the donations they make. We use this to log all of our donors, all of our volunteer drivers, and receiving agencies, so that we know the type amounts of food that are being donated, where it's coming from, and where it goes. And then it also gives businesses easy access to their contract in case an inspector comes through their store. So that's Carrot. Just going into some food donor protection information. So one major concern that we come across that makes businesses hesitant to donate sometimes is they're afraid that if the food they donate maybe makes somebody sick, they're afraid that it might come back to hurt them. So one resource that we use to reassure them that this is nothing to worry about is the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. It's a mouthful. It's a federal law that passed in 1996. It protects businesses from any liability, so long as they're donating food, quality food in good faith, so without malicious intent. And then the California Good Samaritan Act just kind of builds upon that that first act, and it protects businesses from liability, so they can donate food after its expiration date. There's a lot of foods that, even though they're past the expiration, they're still good to eat. A lot of stores just can't sell them, so they typically will just throw them away, and we definitely can take those and help feed people with those donations. Okay, so next slide. There's a lot of information, but we hope that it's useful information to keep in mind when you're doing outreach. It's the kind of information you need to effectively educate businesses about the new bill and help connect them with FoodCycle. And it's just handy to know, even beyond this Phone-A-Thon, that this is a major movement going on in the food recovery sector. And we encourage you to spread the word about this bill. If you know anybody that works in an industry that tends to produce excess edible food, you can let them know that this law came into effect and they should prepare for it. Or even if you're at a grocery store, if you're feeling bold, if you're at a grocery store, or you're making small talk, or if you're making small talk with your cashier or food server at a restaurant, you can ask them if they already have a food recovery program in place. And you can let them know that FoodCycle is an organization that can help them meet those requirements. So anyway, moving on to the actual Phone-A-Thon aspect of this. So as we've mentioned before, this Phone-A-Thon is a very important task. It involves reaching out to businesses, letting them know about SB 1383 and giving them the resources they need to start a food recovery program if they haven't already. So this is kind of a form of canvassing, if you will, but from a distance. To start off, we would be giving you all a small list of businesses, as well as a general script that you would use to call them. The script will guide you through to ask them if they already have a food recovery program in place. If they don't, you would explain how FoodCycle could help them recover their excess edible food and get it to nonprofit organizations that distribute that food to the greater community, as well as how they can be in compliance with the law. And so for this Phone-A-Thon, you don't have to make all the phone calls in one day. You can spread them out throughout the next 2 weeks when you have some free time. Although we do recommend that you make calls in the mornings because that's when you'll most likely be able to reach a store manager, which is the person that you would want to get a hold of. So we will give you all access to a spreadsheet where you can keep track of your calls. The spreadsheet will have the name of the organization as well as a phone number. There will be a section where you can check off the outcome of the call, whether the business already has a program in place or not. There's a note section where you can just make any notes about the call that you made. And yeah, let me screen share real quick just so that you can all see what this spreadsheet will look like. Okay. Okay, can you all see this screen? Good, okay. All right, so basically we will be sending you all a follow-up email after this webinar is over, and we'll send you kind of a survey to so that you can let us know if you want to follow through with the second portion of the Phone-A-Thon. Once you confirm that you are willing to make these phone calls, we will compile a short list for you, and we will send you a link to the spreadsheet. Once you log on to this spreadsheet, you can see the first tab here. If you look on the bottom part, there's going to be several tabs. Right now, this is just a sample, so it doesn't have everybody's name on it, but it'll have instructions for it'll help you navigate making calls to donors. So you would basically log on here and you would look for your name on the bottom of the screen. For example, my name is Lolly, so I'll click on my name and it'll just have this list of businesses. It has their names, their address, the name of the contact person, the phone number, and the email. As you can see, some of the information is missing, so it might require a little bit of, we'll try and get you a list of donors that already have all that information, but if for whatever reason there's missing information, or if any of the information is incorrect, because we got this list from LA Sanitation, and a lot of the times the information, it doesn't always translate exactly the way it needs to be. So part of this task is to accumulate the data that you need to reach the right person, and just put it onto this spreadsheet. So you would basically go in and say, I want to start with this Ralph's grocery store has a phone number, so I want to start with this one. I would go into the instructions here, and then there's a link here to some call scripts. So you would click into it and you would have access to the script. And obviously you can look through it before you make your calls, and you can see once you're making your phone call, you first want to say, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm a volunteer with FoodCycle, and you would want to ask for the store manager. You would, once you're talking to the store manager, you would go through this series of, you would follow the script basically. If they know about SB 1383, you would skip this first part and you would go on to the next part. When you get a chance, you would look through the script, and it's pretty straightforward. But once you're done with your phone call, you would go back into the spreadsheet and you would enter any information. If, for example, the site contact, once you ask for their full name, maybe it's not Kathy, maybe it's Samuel Green. You would just edit that information, and maybe they give you their contact information, Samuel at ralphs.org or whatever. You would enter that in there, and then if during your call you come across any information that you think is necessary to write down, you would enter it here, and then you would enter the outcome of the call. So part of the script, it has a question where you would ask if they already have a food recovery program in place. Those are the easy calls, because if they already have a program in place, those calls tend to be pretty short. You would just click here, they already have a food recovery program in place, and then you would just kind of go through, and there's different options here that you can select based on how the call goes. So yeah, that's basically what the spreadsheet here looks like. And we do we would ask that you try and aim for getting through this call sheet within the next 2 weeks. That way after the 2 weeks are over, we can follow up and look through this this list and start sending outreach to these businesses. So yeah, this is basically all the information. Do any of you have any questions about um, this presentation so far, or if you need any more clarifications about the task at hand?
Can I add a couple things actually before we open it up for questions? Um, so I just wanted to say that I know like cold calling businesses can feel, I know I get a little bit of phone anxiety. When I first started this job, I had never had the opportunity to cold call people before, but it's important to remember that the people that you're talking to, they talk to people on the phone all day long. Um, so don't get discouraged if they're like short with you. Um, that's just, they're busy, they have a lot of stuff going on. It's just important that we get the word out there about FoodCycle because they likely already know about SB 1383 and that they have to comply with this law. They just might not know what resources are out there to help them be compliant. So we're very grateful to all of you for helping us out with this because there are so many businesses in LA. It's impossible for us to reach out to all of them. So helping get the word out a little bit will definitely aid us in our food recovery efforts. And something else I wanted to mention is a couple of you emailed and asked me about recording your hours. If you're volunteering for your school or something, you need to have a sheet that says how many hours you work. You can just record this in the notes tab and just say, I called people for an hour on Monday and this is how many people I called. And it's up to you to record how much time you're spending. Just make sure you write it down and then one of us can sign your sheet once you've completed all of your calls. So I think that's all I had to say. If any of you have any questions now, you feel free to unmute or you can post them in the chat. And we will send probably after this session, we'll send a follow-up email with a Google survey, just asking you to confirm if you're willing to do the Phone-A-Thon so we can add your name to a list and assign you businesses. And we'll get that list out to you on Monday. Thumbs up. Yeah, so make sure we'll email you that survey. Just make sure you get back to us with the yes or no.
Okay. Well, I guess with that, we'll close and say thank you very much for attending this webinar. As Sammy mentioned, we'll send you a follow-up email. We'll also send you that survey. We'll also ask if you want some more information about other ways to volunteer with FoodCycle in case maybe this Phone-A-Thon is not your jam and you want to volunteer in other ways. You can also let us know that you're interested and we'll give you those resources. So
and
yeah.
feel free to reach out to either Lolly or I via email. That phone number there is the dispatch number. So it'll take you to our dispatcher, Tammy, but she can forward you to us as well. And then, yeah, any of the information we talked about today is available on our website there as well. So yeah, thank you all for taking the time out of your Saturday. We really appreciate it. And we will get you that follow-up email later today. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy this beautiful weather. I don't know if it's beautiful in LA. I'm in the Bay Area right now, but it's gorgeous here. All right. Have a good one, everyone.